Hey, everybody. I am Dr. Andy Roark, and this is the Uncharted Podcast. Guys, I'm here today with Maria Pirita, and we are breaking down a question from the mailbag. I flippin' love this question. It is from a high standard of care, high touch practice that is feeling like the doctors are maybe starting to let the standards of care slide a little bit. Not for bad reasons, but just because everybody wants to make things more affordable. And we get into the reasons why these things happen and stuff like that. But when you are focused on having a high standard of care practice, how do you keep that standard up there and not let it slide down? That's what we're into. Let's unpack this.
And now, the Uncharted Podcast.
And we are back. It's me, Dr. Andy Roark, and the one and only Maria Pirita. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Hello, Andy. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag. My daughter is, when this episode comes out, it's going to be right around the time that she has her spring break from high school.
Ooh,
and she's a junior, and that means that she will be on college trips.
Oh, so that's exciting.
We have been sitting with my daughter, my wife and I, and our 17-year-old daughter sat down last night, and we were looking at the map and the U.S. News and World Report, and we're like, where are we going to look? And, obviously there's the local schools that we know, but I was like, honey, we should encourage her to think more globally. And she did. And she started putting fingers on the map. And I started immediately panicking. I was like, this is a terrible idea. Like,
why did I do this?
Yeah, exactly. I thought we would show her a much larger map and be like, your education can really be wide open. I thought she would pick the tri-state area, but she took me at my word. And she was like, what is this UC Berkeley thing? And I'm like, that's nothing. That's not a thing. That's not a thing that you need to know about.
But how amazing would that be, though? I mean,
terrible.
That would be so much. No, I mean,
so
travel-wise, awful maybe on the wallet, but experience-wise, incredible.
I struggle with the idea of my daughter being so, we're tight, and just, and it's funny, I wrote about this recently about when I went to VMX, Maria, I saw so many people who were in new jobs, like jobs they hadn't been in before. And it made me really start thinking about what does it mean to be retained in your job? And is that something that we should really strive for? And I think my belief is that people are supposed to learn and grow and develop. But I don't think that ends. We act like that ends with your college graduation. Like you're supposed to learn and grow until your mid-20s and then you're kind of done. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. But if you believe that, then you are going to learn and grow, and then you're going to close chapters of your life and open up new chapters. That is part of learning and growth. And I think a lot of times we, as a species, believe that if something is sad, then it must be bad. And they're not synonyms. And so I use that analogy of my daughter is going to go to college, and that is going to break my heart. It's going to be very hard on me. One of my friends told me it's like a divorce, and I'm like, I totally see that. I'm going to be very sad. But that's not a failure. That's not a leadership failure. That's like leadership success, but also very, very sad. And so I think the idea that things come to an end and that's sad, but also that's the beauty of growth and development and recreation of the self. And I don't know, I'm sort of looking at that sort of philosophically, but it was still, when we sat down to look at where we were going to go visit, that made it one big step more real than it had been in the past. How about with you?
Well, this just kind of reminds me of any time I've had a big move. And the most recent one was obviously when I left my clinic to work for Uncharted. This is doing something completely different. I mean, very similar, but totally different. And so it was really new. But I got to be honest, I felt like I was ready for my next step, except for I loved my clinic so much that I wasn't willing to leave it. If I hadn't been because my husband's job was moving us to a different state and I needed to. So it's one of those things where boy, I truly believe whether you like it or not, you're going to grow. Situations are going to put you in places that make you grow. But I'm also somebody that gets really, really excited. So I think you can be sad and happy at the same time. And people oftentimes feel like you must only be sad because this sad thing is happening, that you're moving away and leaving your family. And it's just like, I was also sad because I was leaving and I was going to put this, and I'm really close with my siblings. So I was like, I'm going to be sad about this, but also I'm really looking forward to living in a new state where it's sunshiny and I'm going to be able to go swimming, and I'll somehow figure out how to get my family to move down here. And sure enough, here we are 2 years later. I convinced my brother to move here. Now we're both in Florida. So I think I could totally see you, Andy, as the football game dad, where you're there, like showing up to the college football games with the gear and everything and getting excited for that stuff. I don't know. I think it's going to be a really fun new stage in dadhood.
I never saw myself as dad who shows up and takes the friend group out to dinner, but I totally am that. Like,
I could totally see you being that guy. Yeah.
It's funny, when I was in college, I didn't understand that dad. You know what I mean? I was like, all right, man, like, your dad wants to take me out for steaks, I will totally go along with you. But now I get it. Like, as the person coming in, I'm like, I do want to take my daughter and I do want to take her friends out because I want this insight into what is her life really like. And like, I didn't understand that you would just want to know a person. And you wouldn't want to know a person so that you could better understand someone that was closer to you. I want to know my daughter's best friend, because then that gives me a better insight into what is my daughter's life really like. And so, but I didn't understand any of that. And now it's like, I totally get it. And so anyway.
Plus, and don't you remember that dad that took you out for steaks? Aren't you like, yeah, that dad was so cool. So it's just like the idea that, I don't know, it's going to be fun. And speaking of like growth and learning and all of these things, kind of lines up with the mailbag that we have today, actually, in a way.
Yeah, it's a really good mailbag. I'm actually really excited about this.
Me too. So it's actually kind of short, so I think I can actually read it, the whole thing this time. So this person, I loved the way that they laid it out, but they said, hi there, I have a question on how to coach doctors. For reference, we are a small private GP-owned practice built on a model of high-touch best medicine. This model isn't cheap for our clients or for us to operate, but we believe the clients who want this level of care see the value as long as we educate them on why. We don't apologize for recommending best medicine or the cost that is associated with that. We don't steamroll clients into decisions, but we do believe in recommending the best option, as in our experience, clients often want a real option, not a list of options that can be confusing to navigate. Our struggle is when doctors go off of this model in how they explain options that aren't best medicine. Assuming positive intent here, we trust it's coming from a place of trying to help clients out financially, but inevitably the staff follows their lead, and as a team, we are no longer advocating for best patient care, but rather making do with as little as we can because of how we present the information to clients. How do you coach doctors to see the way that they approach conversations with clients as a roadblock to providing best patient care? It feels tricky when leadership is one of their peers / another doctor to approach this.
Yeah, this is such a great question, and I really, really love it. All right, I have to start Headspace with a big disclaimer caveat. So I have to say this up front. Now, this person specifically said that they are a high-end white glove veterinary practice. That's what they are. That's what they aspire to be. And so I am going to, one, say to them, I love that you know what you are and what you are trying to be. And I'm going to 100% lean in and help you get that. And also, the advice I'm going to give is for a hospital that has this stated goal. And so I don't want people to feel like Andy Roark said we should do this or do that. And I said, well, Andy Roark says that if your stated goal is to be a truly high-end, high-touch, top of the spectrum of care hospital, then yes. And so anyway, I just want to call that out and say every hospital is different in what you're trying to do. We are going to lean in on what their stated goal is, which I think is great and I love, but I just didn't want people to say, is this his approach to every hospital? It's absolutely not.
I love that. That's actually part of the reason why I love this mailbag so much, is that very much described a bit of my clinic that I worked at before I worked at Uncharted. And it was aha and fear-free. And so naturally our appointments were a little bit longer than the average appointment. And as such, we had to charge appropriately. So there was a specific type of client that we were looking for. And I love that this person knows that too. Like they know we're looking for a specific type of client and this is how we want to approach conversations. For Headspace, I really wanted to point out the fact that this isn't quite a blame game, because one of the things that I picked out of here is that they want to coach the doctors, which is very valid and I think needed. However, they also said that we as a team are now not advocating for the best patient care. And so this feels like it's not just going to require coaching for the doctor. It feels like it's going to require coaching for the entire team. And part of the reason why I truly believe that is because I think a lot of these conversations should be had by your receptionists and veterinary assistants or technicians in the room. These financial conversations about when all the different payment options, all the different things that are available to them, I think that those can be handled by the entire team. And so just from a headspace perspective, I think we're going to have to do coaching, not just on the doctor, but the entire team in order to kind of solve this situation.
I love it. It sounds like from this that the problem has gone systemic. And whenever the problem goes systemic, I'm like, we have to have a whole team sort of solution. And so we got that. I completely agree with you. I love that they said in here, we're going to assume good intent. And that's what you said as well. I think that's absolutely critical.
I was like, they've been listening to the podcast. This is somebody that's listened to the podcast already, because immediately they were like, I'm assuming positive intent here.
I look at this. I do not see any benefit at all of assuming negative intent. There's none. I think that, here's the other thing too. Assuming positive intent on the part of your doctors and your team, in this case, is absolutely going to make you so much more likely to be successful. It is. You are going to be more likely to motivate them, to talk to them, to have healthy conversations. If you are assuming good intentions, you are leaning into the idea that they're trying to make care accessible and supporting the pet owners and to try to help people. They are going to be so much easier for you to deal with, as opposed to if you give the slightest inclination that you are not getting your money, then everything's going to get really hard really fast. That's just, it's not a good headspace. It's not true. It's not what we want. So hold on to that good intent. I mean, hold it on to it like a rope as you dangle over a ledge. Like that is a lifeline. So hold on to it. So I love that for headspace. All right. Big headspace thing for me. I have to start by telling a story about Ben & Jerry's ice cream. And here it goes. I heard an interview with the founders of Ben & Jerry's. It was one of those like How I Built This podcast, which are some incredible podcasts. But the story of Ben & Jerry's, and I can't remember which one is which, but let's just say that essentially, so two guys, in my impression of their sort of interviews and what I've heard and read about them, one of them is a vision guy, and the other guy is the systems person. And so we'll just say Ben, I don't they may switch, but let's say Ben is the vision guy. He's the guy who came in and said, we're going to have chunks of brownie in our ice cream. Like not nubbins, not chocolate chip size, but like big pieces. That's what we're going to have. And that's what's going to make the ice cream special. It's going to be amazing. That's Ben. Jerry is the guy who says, that's ridiculous. The machinery doesn't do that. The amount of extra cost for us to put chunks that big as opposed to finely ground up chunks that we can just feed through our existing equipment, like the finances of this are very challenging. Like, do we really want to do this? I just think of that as a caricature of those two people. And a lot of times you have great partnerships with that. So anyway, that's how they are. And they told this story about what almost broke them at the beginning when they were getting started. And it was that in the first Ben & Jerry's stores, they did not have a scale. And so what they found was they would say, if someone come in and there'd be a person behind the counter, and the person behind the counter would scoop the ice cream. And they would say, one small scoop. And you would scoop this small scoop and you'd put it in the cup. And you'd look at the cup and then you'd look at the person and they're looking at the cup and it's maybe a little bit on the small side. And so you reach back in and you scoop a bit more, and their eyes get big and they smile really bright and they go, oh, thank you. And what they found was they were losing money because they were just scooping these huge scoops because you're positively reinforced to do this thing that the customer is excited about. And so but I think about that, right? They're not bad, but we do have this.
I literally worked at a Baskin Robbins, and as you were saying that story, I remember the look that people would give me if their scoop was a little too small. I really do. And so it's, you do. And then you put a little bit more and they get so excited and you're like, yeah. And I remember my boss telling me, like, we have to make sure we have these perfectly sized for a reason, So.
For a reason. And I'm confident that it happens at every ice cream store. And again, it's not that scoopers are bad. They're not trying to steal from the company. They're just doing the thing that makes someone happy. And how can you not at least understand how it happens? And so switch it over to vet medicine. And so I have this belief, Maria, about what pet owners want. And I don't think it's really cynical. And so just hear me out. I really think that a very good percentage of pet owners, when they come into the vet clinic, what they really want is the lowest cost treatment that the vet thinks is acceptable. Right? They want to do, or maybe that's the lowest cost treatment that the vet believes they need to do. Like, that's what they want. Honestly, that's what I want when I take my car to the auto mechanic, right? Like, when I take my car in, I want the minimum cost for the mechanic to be like, yeah, if this was my car, I would be fine with this. That's what I want. I don't want the mega high option package, right? I don't want the super owner package. I want, like, I don't want it to be unsafe. And I want the problem taken care of, and I want to drive a safe car. And I want to pay as little as I can pay to get that level of okayness. Like that's what I want. And so my thought here in vet medicine is there's a lot of pet owners that come in and they're cost conscious because everything in this world is expensive and getting more expensive. I get it. Like, so the cost of groceries in America has gone up 58% since 2020. I get it. And so I know that pet owners come in, and when we say, well, you could do this, or you could do that, or you could do that, what you said was, I could do option C. You said I could do option C, and option C is the least expensive. And if option C is okay for me to do, then I will take that. Now, we know that we can talk to people about the value of our services and things like that. And some people are not going to take that, but a lot of people are. I go back to Ben and Jerry's. I think that there is constant downward pressure on doctors and also on support staff to lower the standard of care. I think that there is, especially, and again, in this case, we know this is a high-end practice. In a high-end practice, there will always be steady downward pressure, in my opinion, to lower your standard of care. There was always people who were going to be happy to take home one less medication, to do one fewer diagnostic test. There will always be people who will be like, yes. And they will smile and they will be glad that you reduce the cost of their bill by $50 and you still act like what they're getting is okay. That's the big thing here is when you're running that hospital, you need to understand that reducing the standard of care is scooping the bigger ice cream. That's what it is. And so part of running a high standard of care hospital is you have to make sure that there's a scale for your ice cream. And not because your people are bad. They are doing what's positively reinforced, which is dropping the price to make the people smile and to try to get them what they need. And so anyway, that's for me, that's the real big headspace. You got to hold on to positive intentions about your team. You have to recognize this steady downward pressure. And we have got to introduce a scale to help keep our people on sort of the straight and narrow to make sure that they hold up against the downward pressure, the look that people give you when they think their ice cream is a little bit small. We have got to give them support to handle that so that they can continue to advocate for what's best for the pet, even though it's more expensive. So anyway, that's for me, that's the headspace. That's what we're trying to accomplish. Yeah, I think if you can get your head around that, it makes you feel much better about your people. And if you will buy into my idea of the continued downward pressure when you have a high standard of care, it makes your management job a lot more clear. It doesn't say necessarily easier, but it makes it more clear. And once you understand, oh, this is the challenge, we can lay out some pretty good strategies to address this pretty easily.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's a really good point. Something that I put in my headspace piece was really like to know the facts. And I think that that goes a lot with what you're talking about is really having a way of a metric, some sort of audit of your medical quality. Otherwise you don't, because that was something that I needed to know. Based on the mailbag alone, we don't have enough detail to know what they're talking about when they talk about the best medicine situation here. But some of the things here, what are the actual numbers that we're talking about? Are we providing a metric of success in any kind of way? And I don't necessarily mean revenue, although you could if you wanted to. Revenue always sits bad with doctors or with people in this space. Even when we were talking about revenue in my clinic, it was sometimes even just easier to talk about it as the value of service delivered necessarily. Because it's just, you need to know the type of doctor here that you've got also. And so that is something that I wanted to point out when you're talking about coaching this doctor is really knowing this doctor and being able to understand. And you talk about this a lot, Andy. You talk about the different types of doctors and their motivators.
I mean, I would just say briefly, different doctors care about different things, right? Yes, we have doctors that are financially motivated, especially if they're sort of paid on production and things. They go, well, how do I earn income to pay down my student debt to support my family? There's doctors that tend to be patient care motivated, and they truly want to do the highest standard of care. And those doctors are a really great fit in these sort of cases. There are doctors that want to be popular, And that could be popular with the staff or popular with the clients. And then there's what I call simplicity doctors, who are doctors that they want to go home. They don't want this to be complicated, and they want to be able to move on to the next case. And they want to go home at the end of the day, sort of on time. So there's 4 big motivators that doctors tend to have. I think knowing your doctors, I do agree that that makes a difference.
If we're talking about coaching this particular doctor, I think knowing what motivators they have is going to help you in that coaching. I think too, like I was saying, that and then obviously the measure of success here. So we could talk about medical audits and things in the action steps, but I think that from a headspace perspective, at least, just remind yourself of what those facts are. Remind yourself of where this doctor is, where the team is, and whether we have those metrics of success available, and obviously who this doctor is and how we can motivate them in order to really get that coaching to stick in.
No, I think that's really good. I really want to dig into this metrics of success because I think that you're spot on. Let's take a break here real fast and then we'll get into our action steps. I think you were spot on with metrics of success. So the way I looked at this from an action step standpoint, I think you want to fight this battle on 2 fronts, okay? So I think that there's 2 ways you go after this. So restating the facts real quick, my impression was there's more than one doctor that's probably sort of starting to do this. We're seeing some deterioration of our standard of care. And again, at a hospital that is really focused on providing the outstanding standard of care. And then the staff sort of follows the lead of the doctors, and we're seeing some slipping in the quality of care that we want to deliver. I think that, once things go systemic, we have to have a systemic approach. I got 2 sort of general thrusts, okay? The first one is going to be around culture, and the second one's going to be around accountability. And so the measuring of results, I'm doing accountability. For me, the first one is you have got to support, establish, and reestablish the culture of high-touch best medicine again and again every day. And so if you believe what I said about the slippery slope, about the ice cream scoop and people wanting to scoop a little bit more and a little bit more, in order to resist that culturally, you must constantly feed wood into the cultural fires. Yep. Now I'm mixing fire and ice cream as metaphors. Like, I'm not sure how that works, but you have to keep working on that. And so this needs to be a 24/7, 365 exercise that runs in the background. If you really want to be at the top of the medical game, you cannot put that on autopilot, in my experience. You have to, first of all, you have to hire doctors that really want to practice the highest standard of care. Like, that needs to be a thing. And then when we start looking at this, you need to talk about the highest standard of care. You need to be loud and proud about the quality of your medicine. You need to celebrate high quality medicine. You need to feature it. You need to put your values on the wall. Like, seriously, the highest standard of care, like, it needs to be in places that the team can see it. You need to put it as the signature line in your email when you send emails to the staff. Your staff meetings should have a high standard of care component where you talk about what you're looking at medically, services that you're hoping to add. You should highlight the continuing education that your doctors are doing. You should continuously be thumping out the music around the high quality of care, and that is important to you and your team, and it's part of your identity, because it's always easier to lower the standard of care. Like, in the short term, you're going to get pats on the back for lowering the standard of care. And so start with that. Another big part of this is you better get serious about your CE plan. And it's not that I think these people are not carrying out the standard they say they are, but in this scenario, the act of providing the CE, 1, it does educate your people, but 2, it sends a clear message about what you care about and about who you and your team are. I want them to identify not as the happy team that, gets along and takes care of people. That's not bad, but I want them to identify as one of the highest medical standard teams that you're going to find in the state. Our goal is to be the number 1 place to get gold standard care in this city, right? That is our goal. That's our stated goal when we talk about it. Again, but that's just, it never stops. It happens when you're having some problems like now, And it happens when you're not having some problems. It needs to be what you have playing in the background again and again. So for me, that's part one, which is the culture of high touch. You can't negatively reinforce culture. You can't yell at people until they get excited about practicing the highest standard of care. You have got to celebrate the high standard and get them to get on board with it.
Yeah. And I really think that the best way to celebrate those is to use real examples of clients and patients in which the highest standard of care has benefited them. So in my clinic, whether it's wins, when you talk about it or wins, but I am a big fan of praising those people and being like, hey guys, we did a senior blood work on, Fluffy, and we caught a thyroid issue, all because Adam, the veterinary assistant, made sure to advocate for our patient and told mom we need to be doing this every 6 months. And had we not done it, we wouldn't have caught this. Thankfully, this cat's going to be so comfortable. They're going to live life a lot easier, all because we're practicing the best standard of care. And so whatever, and that needs to be constant. I mean, you need to be able to find those stories of the patients whom you've impacted and making sure you're praising the people, the specific people that helped with those appointments. And then also following up on those patients later on in life, being like, we probably added 2-3 years to this dog or this cat because we practice the standard of care. And so I think that's super important. And I think it also needs to come specifically from the team. So I'll oftentimes at staff meetings or ahead of time, ask the team like, hey, do you have any great patients that, you did that our patient of care really might have changed their life? Some of them have been as simple as finding heartworm disease or finding issues during preventative blood work. Others might be in those cases, we oftentimes got those dogs that had recurring ear infections that nobody else could fix. And it was because we were recommending the culture test that was really, really expensive. And it was really hard for people to convince them, but we would have to have that conversation. And then we would use that as a success story later on of, look, this is why we could not fix it, is because we have antibiotic resistant bacteria here and here. Without this, we wouldn't have known. And so props to the person that was able to offer this and have this finally for this dog who's going to get this relief. And so those real stories are so much more impactful for your team than anything. I think CE is also a big one, and leaning into those protocols or those best medicine protocols, not just on the how we do it, but the big why of those and talking about those regularly. And one thing that for my clinic that worked really well, that we had this phrase that would be like, if we lower our standard here, where does it stop? And it's because I do think it can be a slippery slope, right? And I think it can be a slippery slope with anything, even any kind of bad habit that you have, right? You have your one soda that you're having, and before you know it, it's 2 sodas and 3 sodas a day. It can turn into this bad habit. And so if we're able to talk about that as a whole, and we would talk about it with each other and be like, well, if we lower the standard of care here, where does it stop? Where do we draw the line? And we would remind each other of that whenever, we had a situation when we were in that area of, this would be easier if we did not do this. And it'd be like, how can we work to still accomplish this? And we would get creative that way. And so that way we would be a little bit of friction or a little bit of resistance to lowering any kind of standard of care, and really trying to think creatively outside of the box. How can we still help this patient, right? Or how can we still help this client with whatever they need while still, maintaining this standard of care? And so I think that there's also, in the gray area, there's always other options that we don't always see depending on the situation. But I do think talking about those things ahead of time, and we can talk about training in those cases of how you can case study those things with the team. But I think it can be really beneficial.
Yeah, I want to jump back to your point about the examples, and it is so good. And it is so good. You check so many boxes with that. So number one, you are showing your team, we do in fact practice this standard of care. This is an example of what is expected here in our practice. So one, you're setting clear expectations. Number two, you're doing continuing education by sharing these cases and examples with the team. You say, this is why we do urine culture. This is why we recommend it. Because here's the thing, if people do urine cultures and they never even see the results, at some point they stop recommending urine cultures because they're $300, $400 or whatever. And if I don't know this is actually serving some value and I have seen benefit from it, at some point it's me and I am not getting patted on the back by the client for introducing a new multi-$100 test. I've got to see some benefit from this behavior that I'm doing. But if I do see that benefit, again, that's why it's continuing education. I'm going to continue on doing it. And then other people who maybe haven't been recommending that test goes, oh, I'm going to do that in the future. So I think that that's it. And then the other box that you also check completely unrelatedly is an appreciation box. When someone says, hey, I want to talk about what Maria Pirita did and, the standard of care that we offer to, Binky. I wouldn't say standard of care. I would say it in a more informal way, but I want to talk about Binky Winkins and Maria Pirita. And then I say, this is what happened and this is how we do it, guys. That's a type of appreciation that most people don't see in their work life. Like, when was the last time that most of us were called out and said, hey, Andy did this thing and it was really excellent and it was really in line with our values and kind of who we are and what we try to be. And so anyway, I just wanted to shout that out and, give him a trophy and make sure that everybody's going to see that. So I love it. So that's the part one for me, is the culture piece. And so start getting positive, start setting the culture, the continuous messages and reminder about our identity and who we are and the why behind what we do. It's a whole lot easier to tell people the why of the urine culture. It's a whole lot easier to tell people the why of physical rehabilitation when they're not in trouble. It's not, we've had a problem with you not doing this thing, and now I'm going to tell you the why. It's so much easier just to start talking about it in a positive, forward-facing way of, this is what we do going forward, and this is why we do it. And again, edit it to the motivators of the people that you're talking about, to jump back to your headspace. But start talking about earlier. So anyway, part one is the culture piece for me. Part two is the accountability piece, because we are having some slippage here. I think you start part one first, and we talk about, without naming names or getting people in trouble, we talk about, hey, the importance of the medical standards that we keep and who we're trying to be and what goals we're trying to accomplish. And then we have to start with the accountability piece, okay? So the accountability piece is specifically around us doing what we're supposed to be doing. One thing that some practices get wrong, and this is kind of a mixture of the culture and accountability, if you know that you are trying to be the highest standard of care in the area, you should send messages to the clients that make them aware that that's what they're getting. You just do. You do not want to have a practice that looks like the low-cost, high-volume practice down the road, yet your prices are 5 times higher. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to have people walking in and you're just going to blow their doors off because that's not what they came for. It's kind of like, it's the same thing as a restaurant metaphor, right? If you are the Michelin star restaurant, you should do everything in your power to let people know that you're a Michelin star restaurant, and that's what people get when they come there. That way, when they come in and it's $275 for one person to eat, they're like, okay, that's what I expected. If I didn't want that, I wouldn't have come here. And so there is something to that as well. And when I say tell them, I mean that in a sort of a subtle way. I usually, when you have practices like this, they're not in some, little low rent building. They're usually in a facility that sends the message that this is a high standard of care facility. And just the way, like, the professionals of our staff should send that message, there should be just general messaging so that the people who are coming in are people who have an idea that, yeah, this is going to be the best care for my pet, and I should also expect to pay for it. So that's kind of the start messaging for me. Let's unpack your measuring a bit more, because I think that's really cool.
Hold on. Before we go there, it's because I want to talk about the messaging for a minute, because I think this is really, really good. So, and this is a little bit, it ends up coming from a marketing standpoint of making sure you're attracting the right client. But I do think that in this step, you need to make sure that you are standardizing the message, because oftentimes when people call in, for example, clients call in, they'll tell you what they're looking for. And so if they're telling you right there, hey, I have a pet, they've got this ABC going on, but I don't have a whole lot of money and I'm looking for low cost options. I think how your receptionist addresses that is going to be just as important as how your technician addresses that in the room, as how your doctor addresses that in the room, and then how you address it again at the end. And so I think that there is something that, and I'm not saying that it has to be scripted and everybody has to sound the same. We can all say it in how we talk in our own flair and what have you. But what I do mean by standardizing the message is making sure that we are all on the same page in which the way that we are explaining some of these things with our clients. So from the beginning, we're telling them we will not give out antibiotics without diagnostics, right? And making sure we're setting that standard when they answer the phone, which is why I said earlier that this is a whole team situation, because then they're hearing that over the phone first, and they're able to, if they are looking for low cost, I believe that there is a place for everybody in veterinary medicine. there is a place for the low cost services that perhaps might do things a little bit differently. And I'm happy to offer different resources to the clients that need those. And I think that becomes something where you need to meet clients where they are. Because at the end of the day, this client is not going to want to pay the price that I have for my exams, because I'm going to be fear-free and I'm going to take my time and I'm going to do all of these diagnostics. And this might be a type of client that would rather do vaccines at a vaccine clinic because that's the value that they see. And I'm not saying that you should judge clients or immediately. I'm just saying that you need to have a standard way of describing your services that builds the value in what they are and how they are different, so that when you have clients calling in, you are able to set the standard of what they're getting at your practice. And I think that does start before the appointment even starts, because as you mentioned, Andy, if you have this messaging in the way that you're marketing your practice, you're going to be attracting the right clients for your practice. And so for us, a lot of it is our reviews were highly mentioning that we were fear-free, that their pets really liked going there. Some reviews would even say they aren't the cheapest, but you get what you pay for. Like, we had reviews that literally said that. And so a lot of it really is, how the messaging that you have for your in your marketing, but it's also the messaging that your entire team is receiving. And so that messaging being best medicine always first. And then also, if we have financial concerns, how can we guide them with confidence, right? What are the financial options that we do offer that might help them with their situation? And if those still don't work, then what do you do? What can you provide for this person? For us, we had like a whole list of the organizations, the nonprofits that helped with veterinary care that we would give them if they were of the sense of like, I literally don't have any money, I can't bring them in. Well, what can we do to help you? And so we would give them these resources that were available to our local areas, angel funds and things like that we had. But this way we were still able to help as many people, even when we were like, we've never seen your patient. We cannot give you these antibiotics. This is a standard that we cannot break, but this is what we can do for you if you know what you need. And we were able to give them that. But the fact that the whole team knew what to say when that situation came up is, I think, what made us so successful in that area.
I think you're really spot on here. It is even if your team knows, hey, we do top quality medicine, it's what we do. They want to help people. And that you need to give them some support in how they can in how they can do that. And so I think that they should not feel trapped of, no, we only offer the highest standard of care. And if you don't offer them that and stand by it, you're going to get in trouble. Like that, they go, well, that you got to help figure out what is the appropriate way for them to support people in need. And I do think a lot of that is weeding those people out before they come into the building. I don't mean to say that in a callous way, but if someone calls and they're like, I have $125, I think the right answer is, you let me give you a couple practices that are probably going to be more likely to be able to help you. I mean, that's true. That's how I feel. And I think that that's sort of the moral weight that we have to carry.
I've actually had clients that messaged us afterwards and put it in our review, 5 stars. I did not go and see them, but they did. But I told them what I needed and they were able to refer me to somebody that could. So like, I've had clients that literally left us reviews because we were still able to provide like, hey, like, I want to help you and we can't, that's not what we do. However, this clinic I know can offer that. And I think that that's totally fine. I think another way to support them in the messaging too, and I don't want to forget to jump back, but I want to make sure I mention this, is a lot of times these conversations, all the time, they're emotional. And they can create almost like this negative bias when we've had conversations that went badly. And I think we all have those stories of clients that have told us, you only care about the money. Oh, I don't have money for this. You don't care about my pet. Or we've had those conversations which clients just got angry with us because we were trying to simply go and explain standard of care. And so one of the best ways that you can support your team in these conversations is truly to practice those barriers that clients give you so that they know how to handle those barriers when they're put in that situation, and they can combat them calmly in your presence versus when they're in with the client. So what I mean by that is literally, this is soft skill training. But if I'm like, Andy, let's practice this treatment plan real quick. We're going to do the treatment plan. You're going to present it to me as if I'm a client. And then the first time it's going to be super easy. The second time I'm going to be a little bit, I'm going to tell you that I can't do it because of this. And then the third time I'm going to go a little bit harder. But this way, they're able to confidently combat those situations when they're put in the room or over the phone with clients. Because the truth is, you're going to be running into those situations.
I think that is a good team training exercise just around that. I really do like that. All right. So jumping back in sort of the two prong approach. Number one, build the culture that leans into this, and you are going to have to keep putting energy into this because the natural state is going to be a shifting baseline down from the highest standard. It's hard to always be at to be the best. Like, it's hard. It's like being the best in anything. You can't lay around. You have to constantly be pushing and pushing. And the same thing is going to be true here. So build that culture. And then number 2 is going to be sort of the accountability around it. So number 1 is messaging to the clients to try to reduce the number of clients who are coming in who are not looking for what you're providing. That's it. You're saving them time. You're saving your staff stress. And then, when jump back to what Maria said in the headspace, this is key. We can't talk to our doctors about a general vague sense that the quality of care is sliding down. We have got to get serious about what are you measuring here? What are measurements? Now, I'm going to pull you up short and say revenue is a sloppy metric that works for in a lot of cases, right? So if you look and you say this doctor is generating this revenue and this doctor is generating much lower revenue, the second doctor is either not seeing nearly as many cases, which is a problem, or they are not working their cases up, which again, a very sloppy measurement of, are you working your cases up or not? Doctors do not want to hear about that. And that is really important for people to know. You can work with doctors to get to that point. You can normalize conversations about production and things and revenue. It will always be hard. Doctors will never really like it. You can do that. I would encourage you not to. My advice is you need to think about what are the measures that you can look at that relate back to the standard of care that you want to deliver. Is it around dental radiographs? Is it around the blood work that you're performing? Is it the number of hospitalized patients that you're keeping in the clinic compared to outpatient? You should come up with, you can look at revenue, and that'll give you some immediate flags of who's maybe not working their cases up. And then I would go and look and say, where is this doctor not working their cases up? And maybe it is, this person's just simply not hospitalizing and everybody else is. In which case I would say, hey, when we look at the patients that you're hospitalizing compared to the other doctors, you're not hospitalizing nearly as many patients. Why do you think that is? But now we're talking about the specific behavior. It's not, you're not making enough money. It's, you're not hospitalizing enough patients. And so you're going to have to do some homework here, manager, leader friends, and say, okay, let's look kind of where we're at. Where are people, what specifically is affecting my ideas that we're not practicing the highest standard of care. And then we should start to make some medical quality standards. And if you've got a big hospital and you've got a number of doctors, you should have a rough idea of about how much blood work per month people should be doing. And you should have a rough idea of how many patients should be hospitalized per month per doctor. And again, something like that. There's not going to be a number where you say, you need to hit this number. That's not how it works. However, you should be able to start doing your homework and then start to create some baselines and say, this is what I expect. And if you're looking at an area and you have a doctor that lags behind all of the other doctors every month, I think you have something that you need to go and talk about and work on. And again, I would frame it up as a standard of care issue and sort of say, this is where we need to make these improvements. And so what are your benchmarks? We need to dig into that a little bit. And my advice is to come up with medical quality benchmarks and not financial benchmarks if you want to be able to motivate the doctors.
I love that. I love looking at compliance as a whole for these kinds of things, looking at, the senior blood works, the dentistry, all of those preventative care standards are the ones that I find the easiest to look at. But I do think that these are numbers that we should be looking at on a regular basis anyway, because at least the practice manager or the practice owner should be. And I think you hit it when you said the specificness of it all, right? Because if you have recorded rooms or recorded phone calls, sometimes those work really well for coaching because they can hear themselves back and then they can analyze those situations and what the things that they could have done better. Not every clinic has this capability, but if you do, this is where it really comes in handy. And then also like the medical audits. I'm a really big fan of those exam audits, just looking through how having your patient care coordinator or medical director just going through and being like, where are we struggling? Where are we helping? But then you're able to really coach that doctor and be like, listen, Dr. Roark, we've got this, you've got these, we audited 5 different records. This is where I think we've got these areas of improvement, right? But that's what they're looking for. They're looking for specifics, because if you just go in telling a doctor, hey, I think the conversations that you're having are lowering the standard of care. You're immediately going to rub them the wrong way. They need to be able to look at specific situations or, like you said, metrics, something that helps them paint the full picture of where they are in order to coach them to get better.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. That's the last one for me under accountability is the medical quality audits. I was reading this book on high performance management by the guy. He used to be the CEO at Intel, the microchip processor company, and he talked about quality control. This is really fascinating. This quality control stuff was really interesting because there's a bunch of different steps that have to happen when they make microchips, and if any of them go wrong, you have a problem. And the worst thing is if something goes wrong early on, and then you go through the rest of the process of making this expensive thing, but it was never going to work because the first step was messed up. And so he was really fascinating in talking about quality control. He was like, you want to do quality control at the earliest, you want to catch problems at the cheapest place. And so when I take this back to doctors, or, I could say, if you've got a doctor that you just hired and they are not going to work at your practice, you want to deal with that issue before you invest 2 years of training into them. And they're still not going to work at your place. And now you've sunk a huge amount of effort into them. So I thought that was interesting, number one. But number two, what he said was you want to build quality control systems and know you will gear them up when you're having problems, and you can gear them down when you're not having problems, because a quality control system often takes time and energy to implement. And if everything is going great, you don't want to be doing a ton of quality control. For example, let's say that they can grab a microchip and they can test it, but it destroys the microchip. If things are going great, you should test, 1 in 1,000 microchips. But if you're having massive failures, you might need to test 1 in 100 microchips. You know what I mean? All of that carries over to this when we talk about medical audits. If you are having a problem, we need to maybe start to do some medical audits, and we might need to start to do them with some regularity. And when things are going well a year from now, we might be able to back this back off. But right now, when we're having problems, this is something we're probably going to want to do, and we're probably going to want to do it on an ongoing basis. So medical audits. Now, there's a couple ways to do these. My advice, again, you're not trying to police all of the doctors. The idea would be you need to pick a number of cases, say 5, and we're going to pull them, and we are going to have someone who is a competent clinician, well-versed in the standard of care that you want to do, review the cases with them. And just go through, and I would do it as a learning exercise and a discussion of why was this decision made and why did we do this and why did we do that. And again, it's not a gotcha thing. I'm not going to try to go and find the 5 cases that Andy Roark discounted on or maybe didn't charge all he could last month, and he's going to be held accountable for all decisions that he made. It should be fair to me. I should be able to look at some cases that I did work up and say, well, this is why the case went this way, and this is why I did this, and this is why I felt like we got a good outcome here, and talk about those sorts of things. But an audit like that, again, it should be fair. I would try to do it across the doctors. If you have a medical director that's comfortable just sitting down and saying, hey, let's talk through some cases, I think that's a good thing. If you've got young doctors, it can be part of mentorship to say, hey, we're going to look at some of your cases that you did. Make it not low stakes, because you don't want this to turn into a thing that's going to give people panic attacks and anxieties. Let's say you've got a medical director that's mostly a peer to these other doctors and doesn't really feel up to doing an audit with them. Is there an outside person that you could bring in? Do you have an internal medicine specialist that would work as a consultant for you? And you could bring them in and you could pay them by the hour to sit with your doctors and review 1 hour. You're going to review, I'm going to have 5 charts ready for you. You're going to review it with them. And this is, I would be clear about my objectives with that doctor and say, this is where we need help. This is what we're trying to do. And then I would say, you're going to sit with this person, and for 1 hour, you can go through their cases. And when it's done, you're going to take a half an hour and just write up your notes for me. And then you're going to talk to all our doctors, and then we're going to go through and have a presentation, and you're going to walk me through our staff, kind of where we are, what you see, what we need to work on. We're going to make a development plan for our doctors out of this, and just be ready to stroke that check. But if you're serious about this, especially the first time, that may very well be the investment that we want to make.
Yeah, I love that a lot. I think that those are perfect for regular one-on-one conversations too. So if we're not having one-on-ones with our doctor, it's a good time to start having those. And I think that's all part of your long-term strategy really, is just after this, we talked about culture being ongoing. This whole thing is going to be ongoing. And I think regular check-ins with your doctors, having one-on-ones is going to help with that. I also think if you create or, talk about the resources that you have to help in best medicine practices, and some of those, I talk about decline letters, your literature, callbacks for further details and rechecks. All of those are resources that you can implement or have or talk about in the long-term strategy of best medicine. But I think it's all stuff that most of us already have in place. It's just making sure that we're utilizing the resources and knowing and having our team know that they're there for it. But yeah, that's pretty much all I've got.
Yeah, that's it for me as well. Thanks for
Awesome.
being here, Maria. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Gang, I hope this helped. Take care of yourselves, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
And that's what I got for you. Guys, thanks for being here. Maria, thanks for being here as well. I hope you enjoyed it. What a great question for the mailbag. As always, if you have a question for us, shoot us an email. It's podcast@unchartedvet.com. That's podcast@unchartedvet.com. Let us know what's going on. Give yourself a fun pseudonym, a code name, if you will. And Maria and I, or Stephanie and I, will take a crack at it, and we'll give you our best shot. Anyway, take care of yourselves, everybody. Talk to you later. Bye.